Hi there, welcome to the Sam Sorbo Show. We're going to get started here. I've got a lot to talk about. We're going to talk about the death of an icon. And Seton Motley is going to join me to talk minimum wage and other government overreach. And then I've also got a guest coming on to talk about parental rights. There's a bill that's making its way through the Florida legislature right now that we're working very hard to pass. And that's something that you'll also want to hear. And then we're going to do a little mailbag just for fun. So it's going to be fun. So thanks for joining me. Before I get any further with that, I want to share with you this beautiful thing that somebody sent me. This is a 2-year-old who knows all of her letters. That one. How great is that? It's just fun. We love to have our kids learning. And she's 2 years old. She knows all of her letters. Independent. Notice that they're not in order. She started mixing up the order, and that's very exciting. Now, I will point out that the early learning stuff is great, and it also isn't necessarily indicative of future, but it's still good for them. So a lot of fun. I thought that was a lot of fun. So I wanted to share that with you because that's actually the result of some of the homeschool helps that I was doing. And I will get back to those when things start to settle down a little bit. But and by the way, for the radio crew out there who weren't seeing the video, she's just sitting at a table and the mom is drawing the letters upside down to her, actually, and right side up to the little girl. And she's just reading them. She's just that one and this one and that one and this one. And it's just very cool. And it was sent to me by a grandmother who said that some of what I was saying sort of got through, and that the daughter is now thoroughly considering keeping the girl home and home educating her. I will say, I struggle when I understand that having children is, it forces compromise. It forces compromise, right? And I know that that's hard for some people. And yet I struggle that people are so unwilling to compromise, I guess, is really what it comes down to. So that sort of makes me sad. Okay. Let's talk briefly about the passing of Rush Limbaugh. And I'm not going to get into the terrible, horrible things that people were saying after he passed away. Terrible things. Because they hate so much, the tolerant, loving left. They hate so much. It is the death of an icon. That man basically single-handedly is responsible for conservative talk radio. And if you ever get the chance to hear him talk about how he got his start and what he did in the early days and what he was thinking and stuff, it's a really interesting story. And he will be dearly missed. And I was in my car yesterday, driving, and I put on the show just to see what they were doing with the show. And of course they're airing old Rush. And it's like, yeah, he was a lightning rod. He, when I got my start in talk radio, my main, the owner of the network always said, if it weren't for Rush, none of this would be here. None of us would be here. So it's with a great deal of sadness that I talk about the world losing this incredible talent and brain and courageous warrior. And I think it's so telling that the left was so nasty. You know, I'll use that to point out we really need to buck up and recognize what we are up against. And it's not us with some different opinions. It's not. It's a nasty, violent, vile ideology. And I think it was Nietzsche who said, you don't have ideas. Ideas have you. And it's an interesting way of looking at things to understand that there are ideas that own you that are not your own. We have to take a moment and consider what that means. And I'll relate it for you to the whole Npc culture that we have right now. Now, Npc is a word that I define in my book, Words for Warriors, because it's a cultural, it's a newly, minted cultural thing that comes out of video gaming. And it stands for non-player character. And it means that the character is designed by the software designers, and he's designed with a purpose to only help the players get from point A to point B. So he's a non-player character. He's a character in the game, but he doesn't actually play. And so he's pre-programmed with 1 to 5, say, either actions or things that he does or sayings. And so he only knows to say those few things. And we're living in a culture of people who now only know to say those few things, whatever they might be. Whether it's, please wear your mask for the safety of others. Government is good. I mean, seriously, or let's say it's the minimum wage argument. Let's say they're arguing about, well, $15 is a living wage. And that's all they know how to say. $15 is a living wage. And so to talk about that, because I'm the master of segues, I'm going to bring in Seton Motley. He's the president of Less Government. You can find him at lessgovernment.org. And recently came out with this sort of rundown of how poor we are at talking about the minimum wage. So welcome to the program. I don't see you though. Can you turn on your video?
There we go.
There you are.
Hold on. Let me get up from the dog.
You look comfortable.
I was. There's the dog. Yes. The minimum wage is a stupid policy, of course. You can't do anything. You can't make a person worth $15 an hour.
You have to lift your camera.
Oh, sorry. How's that?
Much better.
You can't make anyone worth $15 an hour by making it illegal to pay them anything less than $15 an hour. Wages are predicated upon productivity. And if you're only producing $10 an hour worth of value, the $5 an hour that the government's mandating you pay on top of that is going to have to be made up somewhere else. And we've seen this before 9 million times. We did it in Seattle a couple of years ago. They were the metropolitan lab rat, where they paid $15 an hour. One of two things happened, or both. You cut hours or you cut jobs, because you can't afford, they're not sitting on piles of money waiting to spend them when government mandates that they spend them. They built a business predicated upon market forces. And when the government parachutes in with non-market forces, there's going to be ramifications, intended or unintended. The road to hell is paved with regulation. and that's what happens with the minimum wage. They pretend to know how to run a business when they can't run a business. I love the government, which is $28 trillion in debt and has Medicare and Social Security at $100 trillion short, is going to tell businesses how to run themselves. That's always interesting to me. No one is worse at running anything than government, and they insist on telling more and more people how to run things.
Right. Very, very well said. I want to go back to your first statement, because I think that's really the crucial element. You can't make anybody worth $15 an hour. And that's where the whole thing goes off the rails for me, is that the government is decreeing that everybody is worth at least $15 an hour. And the problem with that is it necessitates all the other prices to jump higher in comparison. And so all the government
and all the other wages too.
And by prices, I meant wages, like all other costs.
If you've got a manager that's managing a bunch of $10 an hour employees for $15 an hour, and then all of a sudden, all the people he's managing are making as much as he is, well, then you're going to have to raise his salary too. And that gets us back to one of two things. Heck, do you remember when Bernie Sanders started paying $15 an hour on his campaign, and he cut everyone's hours?
I do.
Yes, because he couldn't afford to do it at the new artificial wage he set for everybody.
Right.
This is math. This is economics. The wages are based on productivity. An employer hires somebody for $10 an hour because they think they can get $11 or $12 an hour of productivity out of it. That's how it works. Obviously, if it's not worth it to someone to hire someone for $10 an hour if they're only producing $6 worth of value.
Right.
You're losing $4 an hour every time this person shows up for work. That's not how it works. And of course, when you raise the minimum, of course, it's also unconstitutional. I know this is a trite concept to revisit, but it's unconstitutional because we have the First Amendment freedom to assemble or not assemble any way we wish, free from government interference or imposition. There is nowhere in the Constitution where they're empowered to enter into the negotiations between every employer and prospective employee on planet Earth or on the United States and impose their will upon it. That's, I think this gets back to the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which swallowed the Constitution and ate it whole. We've eviscerated the entire Bill of Rights with the Civil Rights Act and created this mentality that government can insert itself in all sorts of spaces it cannot do so constitutionally.
Right. The Constitution has certain provisions that are written and they're just ignoring them.
Well, yes. And that's, again, if you trace the history of the Civil Rights Act, it's amazing how much damage that did to our understanding of the Bill of Rights, the right to assemble, the right to speech, because now we've got government enforcing thought crime, right? I mean, racism is a thought crime. And, you can think anything you want, free from government interference or imposition, and you can't do that anymore because if you have the wrong think, if you think the wrong things, there's punishment. This baker in Colorado has spent years and probably millions of dollars defending his right to not make a cake for somebody. We've got a guy who's now up for head of HHS who spent years persecuting nuns for not paying for abortions. I mean, this is how far upside down we've gotten with regard to the Constitution and its protections from government. it's now the government can do, originally the government could do very little. Now there's very little the government can't do.
Can't do, exactly. The restrictions that the Constitution placed on the government has figured out a way to sort of wheedle out from under them. And part of it is because the government has taught the citizens that it is the answer through our education system. Right.
Well, 20 years ago, I showed up for a radio co-hosting gig. And what the host didn't tell me was a school superintendent was coming in for the whole first hour, and we were going to debate public education. And the first thing I said was, we need to abolish government schools. There's a great line from Neil Bortz, who was a radio talk show host, and before that a lawyer. He's now retired. He said, look, if you go to a Catholic school, you get a pro-Catholic education. If you go to an Episcopalian school, you get a pro-Episcopalian education. If you go to a government school, yes, you get a pro-government education. And it's so unfortunate that we have this incredible human history defying document and governmental system that limits, for the first time in history, the power of government and liberalizes human beings for the first time ever. And we turn over its education to the entity we're trying to limit. It's a complete, I still say, if I could flip a switch and fix one thing, I would end government schools. That would be, because we're fighting, you and I and millions of other Americans are spending every day fighting the symptoms, the results of government schools. And then every year, another million poison pills graduate from government schools and enter the system to further poison the system and create more of the symptoms we're trying to fight.
Yeah. And to add insult to injury. And by the way, I call it a tremendous conflict of interest. It's a conflict of interest is what it is.
Of course it is.
Right.
Yes.
But not only are they creating these, poison pills, as you call them, but they're also rendering them incapable of thought. And so
that's why they're so, that's why what they've trained them to outsource their thinking.
Yes. Okay, that's a good one. I'm going to write that down. Outsource their thinking. That's exactly correct.
Anyone who's still listening to the perpetually self-contradictory Dr. Fauci has been trained to outsource their thinking. Because I just went back. I remember this. I went up and looked at the articles. In October, Donald Trump mentions we have to get the herd mentality, or excuse me, herd immunity.
We have herd mentality already, but yeah.
Well, we have herd mentality. Herd immunity. And which, if you understand anything about virology, that's the only solution, is to get the herd immunity. And you hide the sick, you hide the elderly, and then the rest of us go out and kill the virus for them. And in October, Trump suggests herd immunity. Fauci says, oh no, that's patently stupid and false. And then in December, Joe Biden mentions herd immunity and Fauci defends the play. And if you're still outsourcing your thinking, that's going to
be the solution. Honestly, I'm not a fan of Joe Biden, but with him in the White House, I think that's the solution to.
Well, but he's going to continually move the goalposts on what herd immunity is. He's saying that if you get vaccinated, you still have to social distance and wear the stupid masks and all of those things.
So wait, so it's not a vaccine? Oh, no, it's not a vaccine. The FDA has not approved it as a vaccine.
Right. And let me tell you, I'm going to get vaccinated right after I fly to China. But yeah, they're going to move the goalposts. They're talking about 6 years now, 7 years now, before the economy recovers, which sounds remarkably similar to the 5-year plans Joe Stalin used to impose on the Soviet Union. And he's talking about the end of 22 before we can start acting normally and not wearing masks. And listen, I get it all the time. I've worn masks 3 times, I think, and that was to go to a specific medical facility that made me wear it to get blood work done. Other than that, I go to the grocery store. I'm the only person not wearing a mask, and people look at me like I just landed from Mars. It's not even that they're upset with me for for not wearing the mask and putting them in danger. It's like doing a card trick in front of a dog. They're looking at me like they don't understand how I missed the memo that you're supposed to wear a mask. And they got the memo that they're supposed to wear a mask, so they're wearing a mask. And they put no thought behind it. They were told to wear a mask, so they're wearing a mask. And they're looking at me going, did he not get the diktat? Did he not get the message that he's supposed to? It's very disheartening that this many people can be fooled for this long.
That this many, well, you can, yeah, well, isn't that what Wrigley said? You can fool most people all the time or something like that. Anyway.
You can fool all the people some of the time or some
right.
people all the time. But he said, he finished with, you can't fool all the people all the time. I'm beginning to doubt that.
Well, no, because you and I, right?
Well, yes. And we'll soon be.
By the way, so for clarity, because this is also radio, Seton and I both live in Florida.
Yes.
And the mandate has no teeth in Florida, whatever mandate your community might be under, because Governor DeSantis, bless his heart, said that they can't enforce it.
Right.
But that doesn't mean, by the way, Seton, that they can't create problems for businesses that don't enforce it. And so I'm always a little bit mindful, but this is what I do. I always go in without a mask on. And I also go in with a plan of what I'm going to do if somebody asks me to put a mask on. Now, it's gotten more and more rare that somebody asks me to put a mask on. There was a place where the woman said, oh, we've changed our policy and you have to wear a mask. And then she said, and I quote, shoot, where's my mask? And so I don't care about their new policy because clearly she doesn't.
Right.
Even though every time I walk in there, she puts her mask on, I'm still not masking up for her because she's lost credibility in my mind. And I suppose if she asks me again, that'll be something that I'll have to figure out then. It's just it's that people like simplicity. This is basically like a caveat. People want simplicity. They just want to know, what am I supposed to do? And so I think they get the directive, wear a mask. And so they do it. Now, I do have plenty of friends I have a friend from, I think she's from Lithuania. She grew up under communism. Ain't no way she's wearing a mask.
Right.
Ain't no way. Because people have an inside track on what you and I see happening. They know, they've lived it.
And you speak about the employees at these places. I'm not talking about the managers of these places imposing this. I'm talking about like the cashiers at the grocery store or at the 7-Eleven, the convenience store. They put up those stupid plastic screens that are part way around. And just you can tell when you get there who's a little, because I'm not wearing a mask and they're wearing a mask, and they'll make some eye contact over the mask, like, okay, I get it. And so what I'll do is I'll tap on the plastic. I go, is this bulletproof? Just to make fun of the fact that
I would not be doing that. They
think it's hilarious.
Other thing.
Oh, it's been universally positive response from the
that's good.
From the employees, yes. Because they get it. It's a piece of plastic hanging between you, and I'll just kind of I'll tap on it and see if it's bulletproof, and then I'll lean around it and go, is it? Because it's just, again, no one's thinking about what they're being told to do. They're just doing it. And maybe this was the genius behind this, was because it's health related. And
that's definitely the genius. But listen, we've gotten a little bit off track because this was supposed to be a discussion about minimum wage. And in the article, you pointed out that there are 10 natural laws of economics. And I did want to sort of go through those with you before I have to let you go.
Mm-hmm.
So production precedes consumption. In other words, you need a, in theory, for a business to be successful, you need to have a demand for the product, in a sense, before you start producing.
No, you're getting it backwards. That's what you just made is the argument for open.
That's the
Yeah.
other, right.
You're making the argument for open borders. Gee, if we import 30 million third world people, all these new businesses will sprout up to feed them and support them and all that.
Okay, please never tell me that I'm making that argument, because that is definitely not the argument that I want to be making.
Yes. Well, unfortunately, it was a slip of the tongue. How's that?
No, I flipped it around the wrong way. So
Yeah.
go ahead.
No, you've got the economy evolves. Newt Gingrich, when he was made speaker in '95 in the Revolution, had a great line that had nothing to do with politics per se, but I thought it was a really insightful point. He said, the best ideas are the ones where after you hear them, you go, oh, well, duh. Of course. Why didn't someone think of this sooner?
Right. And so I said it wrong, and I said corrected.
Right.
And the reason that I struggled to get it out is because my brain was going, that sounds so wrong. In other words, the iPhone was created and everybody said, oh my gosh, I have to have that. And no one knew what it was before it existed.
That's right. Right.
So production precedes consumption. In other words, the market runs on innovation.
That's right. And no one can direct the innovation. Penicillin was created by accident. They were trying to do something else. Heck, something as mundane as the 3M sticky tabs, that peel off and readhere.
Right.
He was trying to make a permanent glue and screwed up. It wasn't permanent.
Well, silly Patti.
Yes. And so you can't steer it by government fiat. You can't centralize plan it. You just have to let these people go. Now, the famous Eisenhower military-industrial complex speech, what the other part of it that no one talks about is he warns also about government getting into the funding of science, because he said that will poison science.
No, that's not possible. Science can't be politicized.
See, Fauci, doctor.
But the doctor is in quotes.
Well, yes, I'm starting to think he's a doctor, like Joe Biden's a doctor. Yeah, he warned about government increasing its investment, quote unquote, into science because he saw that as a problem. He used to get so angry when he saw, of course, he was the Supreme Allied Commander of the European theater in World War II, and then he became president. He would see an ad in a magazine like Newsweek or Time for this or that. Oh, shoot, my landline's ringing. I'm sorry. Sorry about that. And he would see an ad for a defense contractor advertising a plane or a tank, and he'd get so angry he'd throw the magazine into the fire. And he felt that way about science too. He respected science, he revered science, and he wanted to protect science from government. And we've seen now, that was in the 1950s. He left office in 1961, and he was exactly right. 60 years later, look at the mess we've made of science. We spend $40 on AIDS research for every $1 we spend on cancer research. How? Because AIDS got politicized and cancer didn't.
Right. And AIDS is a fully preventable disease.
And cancer, yeah, you can get.
Not so much.
Yeah, you can get all kinds of cancers for doing nothing wrong. Yeah.
Consumption is the final goal of production. This is rule 2.
Yes, because you are producing. The point of production is to make things for people. Again, this is the other shoe of the first shoe,
right? Which
is production precedes demand, but you've got to produce things that people want, and in order to continue with your business, to perpetuate your business.
Right.
You can't make things, and government does this all the time. Government makes windmills. Government makes solar panels, and they make no sense from an economic perspective or an energy perspective. And then you end up with Texas, which got $19 billion in 13 years for wind and solar. And of course, because of all that money, their attention got distracted from the real energy sources that kept the grid going and the maintenance of the grid. And then the cold snap hit, and they couldn't handle it because they were relying on stupid fake energy, and they've been neglecting the real energy sources and the grids that deliver it.
But Seton, global warming, they're not cold.
Yes, yes. Climate change. You know, I'm in Southwest Florida. I'm south of you guys. And I woke up in the middle of the night last night with the doors and windows open with my teeth chattering in Florida. So, you know, I had to rush around and close the windows and turn on the heat. So, yeah, global warming. It's, the greatest scam on earth, climate change.
Okay, 3 and 4 are also closely related. Production has costs and value is subjective. So there's costs and there's value, and those are two completely different things.
Yeah, the cost, of course, is if you're going to provide internet service for everybody, it costs money to dig trenches and lay cable and string houses to houses, and or purchase wireless spectrum and build out the architecture inside the spectrum that makes it possible to handle all the traffic of people calling and texting and going on the internet. That costs a lot of money.
Right.
And what's the other one? Production has
and value is subjective.
And this value is subjective. You can build, they're all, look at the Edsel, look at the, there's all kinds of products you can look at. The beta. Well, and we
don't know how many other iPhones existed when the actual iPhone came out, or ideas for iPhones, or ideas for things that weren't even going to be remotely close to an iPhone. We have no idea, right? Because you don't hear about the failures so much. You hear about the successes.
That's right. And, people have to be old like me to remember this, but there was a VHS and there was a Betamax. Right. Sony had their version of a recording tape.
Right.
And it was much better quality than VHS, but it was more expensive.
Right.
And the marketplace spoke, and VHS won, and Betamax went the way of the Edsel and the Dodo. And these things happen remember once upon a time before Facebook, what was the website? I can't remember the name of the website. MySpace was dominant. And all of a sudden Facebook came along. Right. It was a better layout and a better functions. And all of a sudden MySpace, although Fox News made a huge mistake, they pay $1 billion for it. That was about 990 million too much. But yeah, there's always, there's always going to be things that replace the other, unless, and this is very important when it comes to the big tech companies, the government ensconces their market domination. If government creates an artificial cocoon for some sector or some set of companies or whatever, then you can't eradicate them. You can't.
Or frankly, or if the business itself or the business together with other entities creates a cocoon, like what they just did to Parler, right?
Well, but again, they could. The original sin was Section 230. Without Section 230, they never could have gotten big enough to do that to Parler.
Which was government, is what you're arguing. That the government.
Yes, I'm saying the original sin is government.
Right. Same thing with Tesla, right? And so every time I meet somebody who drives a Tesla, I say, "You're welcome," because my tax dollars,
right,
allowed you to buy the car.
I've written about this. I wrote a piece 5 years ago. Elon Musk, the $5 billion government money genius, quote unquote genius. He's received $6 billion now in government money. I could look like a genius too, if I had $6 billion in government money behind me. His entire personal multi-billion-dollar wealth is predicated upon government money.
Right.
He does solar panels and electric cars, which are entirely government subsidized entities and couldn't exist without government subsidies. It's a giant. And like you said, you're right. They should thank us for. We pay $20,000, $25,000 for our cars. They pay $140,000. And they're still subsidized more. They're subsidized more per car than my entire car's value was when I bought it. It's just, it's completely, again, this is government engaged in science again. Eisenhower warned us about it.
Right. Okay, we're going to do number 5, and then I'm going to have to let you go. Productivity determines wage rate, which is where we started this conversation.
Yes.
And the idea that you can't pay extra. You cannot afford to pay somebody extra for work that they are not performing, for value that you are not getting. And that's really where minimum wage comes in. But the other thing that I want to say is that raising the minimum wage disenfranchises youth, because the minimum wage was basically set out, and minimum wage jobs in general should be about teaching somebody how to work, how to show up on time, how to perform menial tasks for a wage, for a market set wage, and not try to make a living that way, but encourage them to make more of themselves.
It's not supposed to be a living wage. It's
more than but that's right. That's the hyperbole. That's the line from the left, that they're changing the meaning of minimum wage to living wage. And it goes back again to my book. We should not be allowing them to basically hijack our words. And I'm not for the minimum wage. The minimum wage is zero. It will always be zero. That is the minimum wage. And the government can try to say it's something else, but it's not, because if you don't have a job, your wage is zero. That's the minimum. That's about as low as you can go. So I first of all wanted to thank you for writing this. It's an article. Is it up on redstate.com? Is that where
it's
I
on
saw it?
Redstate, it's on redstate.com. It's now archived at lessgovernment.org if you want to go there.
Okay,
And,
it's called The Minimum Wage and Other Examples of Government Breaking the Laws of Economics.
Right.
And that's really what this is all about. And I encourage people to go take a look at it. And Seton, thank you so much for coming on the show. So Seton Motley, lessgovernment.org. Appreciate it.
See you guys. Thanks.
Okay. All right. So joining me now is Patti Sullivan, and she is working on a parental rights bill here in the state of Florida. But I wanted her to come on because we're not just talking about Florida parents. Isn't that right, Patti?
That's correct. That's correct. Hi, Sam.
Hi. It's good to see you. And thank you for, well, you didn't see Seton, but he gave us an entire tour of his apartment several times during our interview.
Exciting.
He just got up from his chair and started walking around and walking around and walking around. He never sat down again. So anyway, it's great to see you. So we're talking about this parental rights bill. So it hasn't been passed. It still needs support in the state of Florida. There are other states that are considering things like this. I don't have a rundown of where they all stand, but just tell us, why is this important? What are we talking about, and what value does it have for us? And why should we be investing our time in maybe seeing that this thing succeeds?
Well, I mean, thank you for having me on. I think this is key right now strategically all across our nation, because I don't know if all of our parents are aware, but Parentalrights.org was founded by Michael Ferris many years ago, because he saw what was coming down the pike as far as infringement upon parental rights here nationally. And he created a movie called OverruledMovie.com. It's a short documentary. And that was filmed mostly here in Florida in 2011, when the Florida legislature passed a very simple memorial affirming parental rights to the Congress here federally. So they can check that. They can check out more about parentalrights.org there. But here in Florida, our bill in particular is very strategic, in that we are stepping up into the fray and helping the government come into alignment and recognizing that parents have the right to determine what's in the best interest of their own children and not the government. So that line, you would think that that's common sense, but more and more it's not common sense. So we actually have to have a law that says that.
It seems crazy
that we would,
right? That we would need to affirm that. But the Bill of Rights is a very similar document, in the sense that there was a big tussle between John Adams and, I believe it was Jefferson, who drafted the Constitution, about whether the Bill of Rights was necessary. And John Adams insisted, and those two men just fought tooth and nail, but John Adams eventually prevailed in insisting that we adopt a Bill of Rights that the citizens hold and have without any infringement by the government. And it wasn't enough that the Constitution just said, hey, anything that's not detailed in this document, this Constitution, it's not a power of the government. And we're seeing that the government is figuring out, the legislators they're very busy figuring out ways around the various clauses in the Constitution to say, oh, we do have a right. For instance, Obamacare, they figured out a way around because there's a commerce law, and so that we can use the commerce law to argue that we need this healthcare thing because healthcare can't cross state lines or whatever. It's absurd, and it's a power play, and we're going to see it. This is what Michael Ferris identified. We're going to see it as regards parents' rights with their own children.
Exactly.
Coming down the road. In fact, in my book, They're Your Kids, I quote Melissa Harris Perry and I quote Hillary Clinton. And Melissa Harris Perry said, well, we have to get away from this idea that parents I think it's something like parents own their children. The children belong to the state.
Never. Yes. And the lines have become increasingly blurred. And now we're looking at a situation where if parents don't stand up, our legislators are going to continue to infringe upon our rights. It's happening more and more here in this state. We have multiple examples on our website, parentalrightsfl.org, in the news section, multiple examples just in this past year where the lines are so blurred that the government thinks they have these things, the ability to do these things. And when you actually quote the law to them, they completely disregard it.
Can you give me one example?
Well, for one example, I mean, just last year in Jacksonville, it made national news where a child, a 5-year-old little girl, was Baker acted by her teacher for throwing a tantrum. And so what happens is if you don't, it should be that.
Okay, sorry. Baker acting is committing somebody to a mental institution for 48 hours for supervision, 48 or 72.
48 or 72. And this little girl was Baker acted. You can go back and watch the video of the police officer walking her out. Number one, her parents were never contacted. And if a person is put in a facility for 48 or 72 hours, they can have no outside contact with family members until after that amount of time. So these parents were not notified until the child was already Baker acted. And you can see the police officer walking her out on his video cam, on his chest cam. And he himself is saying, as the little child says, "Are you taking me to jail?" He himself is saying there's something wrong with this, on the camera. So that's just one of many examples. I mean, there's multiple examples where these laws are being infringed upon, and parents need to take that step. We can see more and more that our legislators need to be held accountable. They need to put these things not only into statutes, but they need to respect the law. And what this bill does is basically puts governance on these government entities where they have to include parents in on these laws. So that's one example.
That is so astonishing. I hadn't heard that story, and I'm shocked that the police officer didn't do something about it right then and there.
Once the Baker Act has been enacted by a quote unquote person who has the authority to do so, no one else can intervene in that.
That's great. Okay, so back to the parental rights bill. What can people do to help with this, and what can they do in their own states?
The Parents' Bill of Rights. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
The Parents' Bill of Rights, HB 241 and SB 582. HB 241 is led by Representative Erin Grohl. She's the representative in my district, District 54. And what we need, it actually passed through all 3 committees last year on the House side, and it passed on the House floor. It passed through 2 out of the 3 committees on the Senate side. And for reasons that I won't get into, but you can ask me personally if you want, it died in the 3rd committee, unfortunately, by friendly fire, which was a sad event. I don't understand the constant politics that go on, but that's why it takes parents to rise up to step into this gap. And our legislators, especially here in Florida, we're seeing it around the nation, but our legislators here in Florida need to hear from families all throughout Florida. And those calls to action can be found on our Facebook page at Parental Rights Florida. And you can also find us at parentalrightsfl.org. But this bill, the parents in Florida need to step up and let their legislators know that this bill is necessary. This bill is important to them. And throughout this nation, I think it's going to be important. We have 11 states already who have passed, I would say, just a shortened version of this bill, including Nevada, which was led by all Democrats. So this really shouldn't be a partisan issue. Should be a parents issue, and it should be a family issue. And last year, we actually did have bipartisan support. We had a press conference with Democrats and Republicans. However, if they do not hear from the families and the parents, I think if anything that's happened in this nation in the last year or so is that the people are recognizing that we need to step into the gap and let our legislators know that these kind of things are important to us, and families should be honored and respected above all.
Yeah, I love the work that you're doing, Patti, and I can tell you're enthusiastic, and I really appreciate it. It's contagious. Yeah, and I will post in the description where people can go, especially in the state of Florida. But even if you're in a different state, you can go on and see the examples and see what's necessary, and maybe participate in your state, or maybe start a bill in your state.
Right.
It's sad that we are at a place where we would need this.
Yeah.
But I think that it would be foolhardy to just shrug your shoulders and say, well, it won't happen here.
Right. If they're interested in doing it in their own state and they go to our website, there's a free downloadable ebook that they can download that will describe our rights as parents. It will describe the infringement of the government upon our rights as parents, and it will also explain very clearly why we need the Parents' Bill of Rights. And I would encourage other parents in other states to contact parentalrights.org to see how they can work with their legislators to pass something that's similar to this. And this is key because a lot of states are watching us, several in particular, I would say, to see how this is going to play out. And we believe that we're at the forefront of a new movement here in the United States by getting this Parents' Bill of Rights passed.
Great. Patti Sullivan, thanks so much for coming on, and we'll talk to you soon because I'm going to get involved here.
Okay.
All right. So moving on, I wanted to go through some of my emails that I've been getting from people. I got a ton here. It's crazy. I don't know why, but I like to print them out. And in no particular order, because honestly, I didn't have even time to order these. But they bring up some really interesting points. And, a lot of them are in response to the interviews that I've been doing for my new book, which did hit #1 on Amazon. And I'm very excited about that because I think that it's an important, I hate to say it's an important book. It's an important topic that we ought to be discussing, is the value of our words. So I started the show talking about minimum wage and the fact that the government is now getting involved in economics. Fauci got involved in economics. He has no right to get involved in economics because he justified his involvement with a scientific medical justification. And unfortunately, that should not be a consideration. Economics people should be involved in economic decisions based on advice, perhaps from science or medicine, right? But I started with minimum wage because the minimum wage is the government itself devaluing the dollar. The minimum wage devalues the dollar. That's the big problem. And when it does so, it actually invites inflation. And as it is inviting inflation, you're going to see a struggling economy. And so our economy will struggle because of the actions of the federal government or the state governments. And that's what we're seeing play out in Seattle. Now, part of the reason that we are the United States of America and not just the American country. I know we go by America, but that's a shortening of the United States of America. Part of the reason for that is because all the states were separately engendered, and so they can proceed the way that they want. And that would be a comparison for us to be able to make for what policies work in different states and what may or may not work for our state. So for instance, the policies that California is pursuing is driving that state into the ground. Those policies should not be exported to other states. And yet, because we aren't taught any of this really in school, in our government schools, and you heard what Seton Motley said about government schools, we are destined to repeat history in a sense. All right, so this is a long one, but it says at the end, thank you and your husband for standing up for what is right. What if everyone decided one day to turn their phones and TVs off and people actually spoke to one another? Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. And that's Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. I just thought that was really a lovely comment. Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. And I got into, I'll share this with you. I was on with Eric Metaxas yesterday, and he said, you know, you and Kevin really stand up for the culture, and Kevin has sacrificed so much. And you both have sacrificed so much, and, you know, hats off to you, blah, blah, blah. And I've turned over, in a sense, I've turned over a new leaf because I've had a realization come to me. We're not people see us as the heroes, right? And I won't push back on that, but they see that we sacrificed. And I will push back on that. The sacrifice is made when you sacrifice your values and principles in order to achieve some kind of false truce, some kind of temporary peace. That's you're sacrificing. You're sacrificing when you put the mask on if you don't believe that the mask is helping you. It's your sacrifice, it's not mine. We gave up making Hollywood money. That's not a sacrifice. We have enough food on the table. We do pretty well. My book's doing well. I know I mentioned that. There are other avenues. Are they as lucrative? No. I don't care. That's not the point of this. That's not the point of life. But we've been brainwashed. I'm going to get really philosophical today, I guess. We've been brainwashed to think that college prep and career readiness should be our highest aspiration. And that is simply not true. Your highest aspiration for your, and believe me, when I first started thinking about this, I remember meeting somebody ages ago, probably before I was a Christian. I'm sure before I was a Christian. And they said that they hoped their child would go into the ministry. And I was like, why? There's no money in the ministry. Well, first of all, that was just wrong. There's a lot of money in ministry. And I'm not making, that's no comment there. I'm just saying there can be money in ministry, but that wasn't their point. Their point was, we want our child to know truth, beauty, and goodness, and to walk with the Lord. I think that is a great foundation for a happy life. I know now that that the foundation of making a lot of money is not the recipe for a happy life. So there needs to be a balance. And I was having this conversation with a young person the other day, and she said, well, I don't know where I'm going to go to college. I'm not sure what I want to study. I don't really have like career aspirations per se. There isn't anything that's really speaking to me. I really want to have a family. And I said to her, you know, that is a very high aspiration, is to have a family, raise your children with good, solid value. Like, there should be nothing wrong with that. But our culture says, no. College prep and career readiness, women's empowerment, get a job, get a career, wear high heels. Like, and I just think that's a lie that we've kind of bought into, I guess. Okay, here's one. Just heard you on Heidi Harris' show and loved your message. bought your book. Can't wait to read it. Keep up the good work you do. Thank you so much, Kathy. I really appreciate that. Buy my book for a friend. Makes a great Father's Day, Mother's Day gift, Easter, good Easter gift. In fact, I'm thinking about putting together Easter baskets and putting my book in them. Although it's not Easter colors, it's red, white, and blue. That's okay. I'm appalled about Facebook canceling Kevin. Christianity as a whole is being attacked, and I applaud you and your husband making faith-based and wholesome movies. If there is some other social media platform you and your husband will be using, please let us know. Yes, CloutHub, Parler, and Gab. And I haven't decided where I'm going to focus. So I have accounts, and so does Kevin, at all three. And we're just inviting people to follow follow there. And we're posting sort of a little bit intermittently right now because the following is not that big. Kevin still is huge on Twitter. My Twitter following is growing for whatever reason. At the Sam Sorbo is my Twitter handle. And so thank you for reaching out and asking, Kevin, where we're going to land. We don't know exactly, but I will say, please go to our website, Sorbo Family Film Studios, sorbofamilyfilmstudios.com, and it'll be in the description, and sign up for our newsletters because we do send newsletters, and they're kind of fun. And we just want to be able to stay in touch with you guys because eventually it is quite possible that the left succeeds at silencing us on social media. They've been doing a bang up job with Kevin on Facebook, frankly. And I think that's it. Because I've been watching the time this time and I'm trying to calculate in my head how long I have. I'll do one more. I do have an extra minute here. There are many non-politicians of the Democrat Party that are moderate, and they're also concerned about the move towards socialism. And so this person is first thanking me for speaking out about the communist and socialist and fascist tyranny that we're seeing. The liberal fascists are hard at work. There are no right-wing fascists. If you hear any of my interviews about my book, that's sort of a core point that I'm trying to get across. But they ask me, please also consider differentiating between Democrat socialist politicians versus Democrats that are true follow Americans of the Constitution. If you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. That's all I can say. So those people need to wake up and understand that they're part of the problem. That's pretty much the message that I have. There were plenty of lovely, kind Germans who did nothing during the Nazi regime, who refused to participate, who were too scared. And I understand scared, but sorry, no, I got nothing. I'm happy to know that they're out there, but if they don't make their voices heard, then they're useless. Other than that, I really don't have an opinion about it. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me. This is the Sam Sorbo Show with your host, Sam Sorbo. Tomorrow, I will be at CPAC. I'll be doing a special recording there. I'm hoping to get lots of great recordings to share with you in the coming weeks. So do stay tuned. Sign up, please. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Even if you only listen on radio, if you subscribe to my YouTube channel, it just helps me grow my brand. And if you believe in my message, then any help that you can give me to get my message out is greatly appreciated. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.